My name is John Williams, a 30-year-old businessman. There's nothing special to note about me. I'm just working as an office clerk at a large wholesaler for alcohol. We don't have a store, but we do deliver beer and wine on credit to a wide variety of eateries such as bars and izakayas. Each delivery person is in charge of a truck, and when morning comes, they load barrels of beer and deliver them to the stores they are in charge of. As for me, I'm working in an office with only women, handling things like processing credit slips and various chores. I think I've been placed here because they need at least one male hand in the office. Still, it's true that I often have bad experiences because I'm looked down on by people like the driver, the procurement personnel, and the warehouse manager. On top of that, the general affairs department is a women's garden, and I feel uncomfortable. I often feel stressed because it feels like I'm caught on the horns of a dilemma. But the reason I'm still at this company is because not everything is bad. I have many colleagues I get along with, and I often get treated well by our regular customers. There are times for ups and downs. It would be the same no matter where I work. The change in my life happened this spring. The cause was a new department manager who joined the company in the middle of the term. He was a tough guy with a background in finance, having served as a branch manager of a regional bank. He had a tendency to try to settle everything with numbers. The department manager was rough from the start. Perhaps he felt pressured to produce results because he was hired in the middle of the term. His demands on us were too high. Suddenly, the previously laid-back atmosphere in the office started to get tense. According to the section chief, who secretly told me, it seems that the director is suggesting personnel cuts to the president. Indeed, there have been fewer drinking parties recently, and opportunities for outside drinking have been lost. It's a big blow to our company, which delivers alcohol to restaurants. I knew that sales were sluggish. When I heard about this from the team leader, I had a bad feeling. This was because, as far as the director was concerned, my performance seemed to be at rock bottom, and I was well aware that he had me in his sights. Perhaps being the only man among the clerks might give the impression of being incompetent. I had the impression that I was doing a decent job, but the director didn't seem to recognize my efforts at all. A month after the director took office, the discussions about reduction began. It started with soliciting voluntary retirees. Apparently, no one expressed a desire to leave. The director then prepared a list for the reduction. My name was at the top. He subtly applied pressure, saying, "It's not mandatory, but if you care about the company." Besides me, several delivery persons and assistants were chosen. It seemed like an arbitrary selection on the director's part. The warehouse keeper's name was on the list, and he was outraged, and rightly so. If the warehouse keeper quit, the company would be thrown into chaos because no one else could find a single bottle of wine in the huge warehouse. The president didn't seem to like the list either, but he had difficulty expressing his opinion to the director, who was an elite from the banking world. Even those whose names were on the downsizing list didn't willingly apply to resign just because their names were there. The company atmosphere was like, let's ignore the list. But the director didn't like that. Salespeople are in the company during the day. During the day, the director's target was me, the only one left in the office. Even when he didn't have anything to do, he kept loitering around my desk and nitpicking. I sincerely wished he would just stay cooped up in his office. Are you doing only that job every day? You have tons of work because you're slow. The director would lean over my work and scold me in an unnecessarily loud voice. I guess he wanted everyone in the office to hear. Every day, the office atmosphere got worse because of his yelling, and the director blamed it on me. He said that the reason the employees' motivation isn't increasing is because I'm in the company. I was stunned to be told that. Being called incompetent and a burden to the company every day was really wearing me down. My stress was reaching its limit. I'm convinced that the reason I blacked out and collapsed while trying to get up from my chair at the office was due to the director. I don't remember anything after that, but apparently I was quickly rushed to the hospital by an ambulance. I heard from my colleagues that I had been unconscious and appeared to be suffering since I collapsed. It turns out stress was indeed the direct cause of my collapse. It was a result of a dreadful pattern of stress leading to insomnia and overwork. When they performed the tests upon my emergency arrival at the hospital, the attending physician told me that there seemed to be other worrisome symptoms, which surprised me a bit. It turned out I would have to continue with further diagnostic tests. The results of these thorough tests revealed early-stage colon cancer. Receiving a cancer diagnosis was quite a shock, but I was a little reassured when the doctor told me that since it was in the early stages, there was a high likelihood of complete recovery with surgery. A hospital stay for tests turned out to be a much longer hospitalization than I anticipated, which was bothering me. Just as I thought my hospital stay might drag on a bit longer and contacted my office, the document that the secretary, now named as Nancy, brought me was early retirement papers. She looked very apologetic as she handed them to me, saying she was told by the director to deliver them. "Thank you for taking on such a nasty task," I said when I spoke to Nancy, who had brought the documents. She told me, "You should just ignore such papers." Of course, I don't want to take early retirement. I shoved the envelope into the drawer of the bedside table in my hospital room. "John, we'll take your temperature and blood pressure now." The nurse named Kathy came in, replacing Nancy in the room. The first time I saw her, I was so struck by her beauty that I didn't even realize when the injection was over. "Ah, yes, please go ahead." I get overly nervous when Kathy comes in. Her being extremely beautiful is one reason why I get so nervous. On top of that, she never smiles. She's called Iron Mask by the inpatients. It seems her fellow nurses also call her that. Kathy's expressionless demeanor and good looks make her appear doubly intimidating. It's not that she's cold or anything like that to the patients. She's a strict yet kind nurse. The young attending physician told me that he's most afraid of being scolded by her. She doesn't raise her voice, but seemed to be able to express her anger in a quiet manner. "Your pulse is a bit fast. Are you not feeling well?" Kathy, who was taking my pulse, queried. So it seems my pulse quickens just by having her near me, I thought, feeling nervous. "I'm okay, there's nothing wrong with me," I hastily replied. Kathy stared at me fixedly and then let out a small sigh. I started to panic, wondering if I had disappointed her, but her sigh was not one of disappointment. "Don't just dismiss things lightly as okay. You're here to fight a disease, remember. If you're feeling bad, or if there's even a slight difference from your norm, make sure to tell us," Kathy said with a serious expression. She then deeply bowed in my direction, apologizing for her inadequacy. "Wait, why? You don't need to apologize for anything, Kathy. I understand there's a certain atmosphere around me that makes it hard for you to open up. I'm really sorry about that," I said gently, looking at her face to see if she's hurt. Her usual expressionless face remained unchanged. I'll be a good patient." My words slipped out awkwardly as I didn't know what else to say. Iron-faced Kathy's eyes widened in surprise, then she quickly returned to her usual expression and simply responded, "I appreciate that." I suddenly felt embarrassed and couldn't say a single word until Kathy left the room. Hospital life is surprisingly busy with continuous tests before surgery. Today, I didn't return to my room until past 3:00 p.m. after the tests. Dragging my test-weary body into my room, I found that there was already someone there. It's my boss. Just seeing him doubled my exhaustion from the tests. He noticed me returning to the room and without any words of consolation, just said, "Hey." I didn't feel like responding, but he's still my boss. Even if he's not the most pleasant, as an employee, I don't have much room to argue. Quietly, I just sat down on the edge of the bed. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience, Director. That's the unwritten rule for employees, I suppose." My apology was met with a condescending nod from the director. "I've heard you're in for a long stay. Have you received the early retirement forms? Why haven't you submitted them yet? The company would be better off without dead weight like you." He spoke to me as though I were a child, which got under my skin. I must have let my irritation show, I thought. The director gave a nasty grin. He was trying to rile me up. I knew that, but his attitude was hard to stomach. "You came all this way to tell me that. I'm sorry for the trouble, but I have no intention of retiring early." I tried to choose my words carefully, trying to stay as calm as possible. "Really?" I wanted to shout him down and send him packing. The director smirked as if he could read my thoughts, and he didn't stop. If I caused a scene here, he might use that as an excuse to fire me. The tension hung in the air between the director and me like a standoff. The one who shattered that tension was Nurse Kathy. "Excuse me, I believe I asked you to call me with the nurse call button once you return from your tests. Have you forgotten?" The hospital room door burst open, and Nurse Kathy stood there, glancing back and forth between the director and me. "I'm sorry, but could you please leave the room?" Her voice was soft, but there was an undeniable authority in it. She shot the director a frosty stare, explaining, "He's tired from his tests." What a rude nurse to his superior. The director rose from his chair, glaring at Nurse Kathy, but she simply pointed to the door and repeated, "Please leave, boss. That doesn't matter here. This is a place where you follow the doctor's and nurse's instructions. You think being a boss works everywhere." The director's face turned beet red at that. It was like she'd called him out for flaunting his petty power. "How dare you? I'll remember your name." With a parting shot, the director stormed out of the room like he was running away. I listened to the receding footsteps, letting out a sigh of relief. "Would you like to lie down?" Kathy, as if nothing had happened, helped me comfortably lay down. After lying down, all the exhaustion came to me. "Why don't you take a nap until it's time for dinner?" As she suggested this, she pulled the blanket up to my shoulders. I couldn't help but feel a little shy. "Thank you. That man, he's a bit of a problematic boss. I appreciate you sending him away." As Kathy was about to leave the room, I called out to her. Slowly, she turned around. "It's my job, right?" Her flat tone delivered those words, but still, I wanted to say thank you. Upon hearing this, her hand, which was on the doorknob, stopped, and slowly she turned back towards me. Kathy looked at me with a strange expression. For a moment, I thought her feelings briefly showed on her face. Her face returned to its usual expressionless iron mask without saying anything more. She left the room. Fortunately, the surgery was successful, and I continued my treatment towards recovery. My body was at its limit due to stress. Even after the surgery, I was told to rest properly. During my lengthy hospital stay, I set a goal for myself, to see Kathy smile by the time I was discharged. I really wanted to see her smile. I also had a feeling that I wanted to grab her attention. Apparently, the director had visited the hospital several times after my surgery, but he never made it to my room. I was surprised to hear from another nurse that Kathy had turned him away every time. I was nothing but grateful to Kathy. I was attracted to her. All the strategies I came up with to see her smile ended in failure. Whether I prepared a horse mask or practiced magic tricks, everything was a bust. When I shared my Make Kathy Law project with other nurses, the news spread throughout the hospital. Getting advice from other patients, brainstorming strategies together, my hospital life quickly became more fulfilling. Yesterday, finally, a seemingly exasperated Kathy told me to focus on my treatment since I'm the patient. From then on, every time I tried to make her laugh, I got scolded with the same line. One day, as my discharge date was approaching, I got an urgent call on my cell phone from my colleague Laura. There had been a customer who was a regular complainer, making numerous complaints every day, causing work to be disrupted. Normally, I would be the one dealing with this customer. The complaints were usually about simple things like wrong order or late delivery. Nothing too serious, but this time, it seemed the customer was extremely angry because they received a different product than the one they ordered. I understand the situation, but I'm in the hospital. If you can't handle it, just escalate it to upper management. Let them deal with all of it, I advised. Normally, I could handle most complaints at my level, but this time, I'm afraid the bosses would have to step up. Laura said she would do that, and hung up. The complainer was a guy named Mr. Ferguson who ran a couple of bars and snack joints. He could be a bit tricky at times, but he wasn't unreasonable. As long as the first step in handling the complaint was correct, there shouldn't have been any problems. I've never experienced a complaint so severe that the phone didn't stop ringing for days. The day after Laura's call, my boss barged into my hospital room. He burst past the nurses who were trying to stop him, giving me quite a surprise. "Director, what's going on?" His forehead was covered in sweat, and his usually crisp suit looked somewhat worn out. "You've been handling that complainer and smoothing things over. It's your responsibility. Contact him and sort this out now." He tossed the company's cell phone at me, which made me feel exasperated. I did not pick up the company's cell phone, so the director kept yelling at me, saying that I should be grateful that a useless person like me could be of use. I was starting to worry about causing a disturbance in the hospital. Reluctantly, I picked up the company's cell phone. "Is it you again? This is a hospital. Please keep it down." Just as I was about to make the call, Kathy entered the room. The nurse who had initially tried to stop the boss had apparently fetched Kathy from another ward. She was stone cold, glaring at the director without flinching, with her imposing demeanor. The director was taken aback. I'm giving this good-for-nothing some work. Don't meddle with company affairs. You're just a nurse. Just as the boss's tirade was coming to an end, Kathy swiftly grabbed the company's cell phone from my hand. Then she shoved it into the director's chest pocket rather forcefully. From this moment, this room is off limits to visitors. Why don't you go back and do your own job? Kathy said as she pushed the boss out of the room and closed the door behind him. I heard a click as a sign was hung on the doorknob. It must be a no visitor sign. I could hear the director yelling outside the room. He made a ruckus for a while, but it seemed like he was escorted out by the security guards who came rushing in. In the end, from what I heard from another nurse, he was even begging her. Kathy, I did feel a bit sorry for him, but I think it served as a good lesson for the director. Afterwards, it appears that the director got more complaints from customers. While handling the complaint, in the end, our regular client, Mr. Ferguson, said he would switch to another liquor store, effectively terminating his contract with us. It was a major blow to the company. After a thorough investigation into the cause of the complaint, a revelation came to light. The director had rearranged the office on his own, and it seems a new and inexperienced worker had been put in charge of order reception with no one to assist. The newbie was left to handle everything on their own. That's when the mistakes at the reception started piling up and caused the complaint. There are so many types of alcohol that you can't count them all. Without an experienced receptionist, it's difficult to understand specific wine brands. Normally, an experienced office worker would be assisting the newbie, but the director jumped the gun with a reorganization for cost-cutting, causing chaos throughout the office and the entire company. When the cause of the huge loss to the company was reported to the CEO, his reputation took a nosedive. Now he's been labeled as incompetent despite being an elite, and seems to be finding it hard to stay in the company. What are you writing? Kathy, who came to change my IV drip, peered at my computer screen. I'm writing my own know-how on dealing with complaints. The method varies depending on the customer. Now that the director seems to have been assigned to handle complaints. The director, while retaining his title, has been told to take the lead in handling complaints. A colleague told me that he's been tormented every day by troublesome complainants. I think it would be a plus for both the customers and the company if I could contribute to handling complaints in any way. Are you going to aid the enemy? I get slightly embarrassed as she tells me this with a somewhat unresolved look. I'd rather see a smile on your face than that shocked look. In the end, I never got to see a smile on Kathy's face during my hospital stay. After a hospital life of over a month, I finally reached the day of my discharge. The attending physician and nurses who took care of me in the ward see me off at the hospital entrance. I'm about to get emotional as I even receive a bouquet of flowers as a discharge celebration. Kathy is also here among the people seeing me off, with her usual emotionless face. She stares at me. I've been in your care a lot, Kathy. When I stand in front of Kathy to express my gratitude, I end up witnessing something unbelievable. You did well, John. Congratulations on your discharge. With that, she softly flashes a smile as beautiful as a blossoming flower. I'm about to drop the bouquet from my hands from the surprise. I thought to myself, what a terrible woman she was at the end. After all the effort, she wouldn't smile at me. But at the moment we never see each other again, she shows me a smile. Memories of my hospitalization with her cross my mind one after another. Once I start to recall the fun moments, I can't hold back anymore. I burst into tears in reaction to her smile. Seeing this, the people sending me off start to roar with laughter. I'm so embarrassed, unable to hold myself back. I crouch down on the spot. Well, do not cry like that. People who work hard deserve a little reward. This is just a bonus. Kathy whispers this while gently patting my crushed back. A piece of notepaper, roughly inscribed with her familiar handwriting, has her cell phone number on it. She gently places it in my hand. Below it are the words, "Contact me if you feel like it. I'll be waiting." By the time I stop crying in surprise and look up, she's already returned to the send-off line, waving with her usual emotionless face. I wave back at everyone while expressing my thanks, then get into a taxi. In the moment I get in, I call Kathy's cell phone. You're impatient, aren't you? After 5 rings, she answers the phone with a soft chuckle. I hadn't thought about how to ask her out and can't find the words in my sudden panic. Will you date me with the intention of marriage? This was the first thing that came out. Even the taxi driver turns around in surprise. I'm so embarrassed I wish I could disappear into a hole. Isn't that a bit too hasty? But okay, perhaps I found the treasure of my life in a hospital, and I was too lucky. A few years later, I can't help but grin imagining her standing next to me in a white bridal dress. How did you enjoy today's story? Subscribe to the channel and give us likes. It gives us motivation for our production activities. We're also looking forward to hearing your comments. See you again in the next video.
Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their inn. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.